The ballroom lights caught every glass in the room and turned them gold, and for once in my life, I let myself enjoy being looked at. 12 years of 80-hour weeks came down to this. My name freshly lettered on the frosted glass door upstairs. Ortiz Calloway becoming Ortiz, Calloway Ortiz, and a room full of people who mattered raising champagne in my direction. I stood near the string quartet in the navy dress I'd bought for exactly this moment, and I let the applause land on me instead of deflecting it the way I usually did. Theo found me first, the way he always did, cutting through a knot of partners with 2 glasses of sparkling water because he was on call and I never drank when I was working a room. He pressed one into my hand and studied my face like he was reading vitals. "You look like you're doing math instead of celebrating," he said. "I'm always doing math." I meant it as a joke. It wasn't entirely one. "Where's your brother?" I scanned the crowd out of habit. The same scan I'd been running since Marcus was 19 and I was the one who fielded the calls when things went sideways. No dark blazer near the bar. No easy laugh cutting through a cluster of associates. He'd texted an hour ago, stuck on a filing deadline, "So proud of you, D," and I'd read it twice trying to decide if it was true. Marcus missed things. He didn't usually miss things that made him look bad in front of our father. "Working late," I said, and Theo's eyebrow told me he heard what I didn't say. I was 3 sentences into a conversation with a bond attorney from Dallas when a young woman in hotel staff black approached with a bouquet of white ranunculus wrapped in heavy paper. "The kind florists reserve for people who tip well, compliments of a well-wisher," she said. "They asked that you open the card in private." Said it was sentimental. I get flowers at these things. I didn't think twice. I thanked her, thanked the bond attorney for his time, and carried the bouquet toward the coat check alcove where the noise thinned out, because whoever sent them had gone to some trouble and I wanted to actually read the card instead of skimming it over someone's shoulder. The card was blank on the outside. That was the first thing that snagged. I turned the bouquet in my hands, and my thumb caught on something rigid beneath the 3rd layer of paper, tucked flat against the stems where the ribbon crossed. Not a card. An envelope, sealed, no return address, my name typed rather than written, Dana Ortiz, CPA, in a font that matched nothing a florist would use. I should have left it. I should have handed it to hotel security and gone back to my own party. 12 years of forensic work had taught me exactly what an unmarked, sealed, deliberately hidden document usually meant, and none of the meanings were good. I opened it anyway. That was the old habit talking, the one that made me open every envelope with our family's name near it before anyone else could. Because for 20 years that had been my job. Read it first. Understand the damage before Mom or Dad or Marcus had to. Manage it quietly. Protect the name on the door. Inside was a single sheet, a screenshot printed flat and cheap, no letterhead. A trust subaccount number. A routing string. And beneath it, a line of transaction dates stretching back 4 months, each one flagged in red by a compliance system I recognized because I'd helped design it. My stomach didn't drop. It went very, very still, the way it did right before I found the number that made an entire audit collapse. I knew that account structure. I'd built the shell of our client trust architecture myself 3 years ago. Back when I was still proving I deserved the corner office. And the electronic signature authorizing every one of those transfers, printed small at the bottom of the page in the compliance system's plain sans serif font, read exactly like mine. Behind me, the quartet slid into something bright and celebratory. And somewhere in that ballroom people were still toasting my name. I folded the paper once, along a crease that wasn't there before, and I did not go back to the party. The chandeliers in the Driscoll's ballroom threw gold light across 300 faces, and every one of them was looking at me. I'd earned this. 12 years of 80-hour weeks, of catching the 7-figure discrepancy nobody else noticed. Of being the first one in and the last one to leave, all of it collapsed into this single moment, my name freshly added to the letterhead upstairs. Ortiz, Calloway Ortiz. I stood near the small stage in a dress I'd bought for exactly this night and let people I respected raise their glasses to me. And for once I didn't immediately start calculating what I owed them for it. Theo found me the way he always did. cutting a clean line through the crowd with 2 flutes of sparkling water because he was on call and knew I wouldn't drink while working a room. He pressed one into my hand and studied me the way he studied a patient chart. "You've got your audit face on," he said. "Tonight's supposed to be a party." "I don't have an audit face, you have exactly one face, Dana, and it's doing math right now." I laughed because he wasn't wrong, and because some habits don't turn off just because the room is nice. I scanned the crowd out of pure reflex, the same scan I'd been running on Marcus since he was 22, and I was the one who fielded the calls when his life needed quiet cleanup. No sign of him near the bar. No easy grin working a cluster of junior associates the way he usually did at these things. He'd texted an hour earlier. "Buried in a filing deadline, so proud of you D, make them toast twice for me." I'd read it 3 times, trying to decide whether it felt true or rehearsed. Marcus missed plenty of things. He rarely missed the ones that made him look bad in front of our father, working late, I told Theo, and the look he gave me said he'd heard the part one didn't say out loud. I was midway through a conversation with a bond counsel from Houston when a young woman in Hotel Black approached carrying a wrapped bundle of white ranunculus, heavy paper, the kind florists save for people who tip well, from an admirer, she said, smiling. "They asked that you open the card somewhere quiet." Said it was personal. "I get flowers at events like this more often than you'd think." I thanked her, excused myself from the bond counsel, and carried the bouquet toward the coat check alcove, where the noise thinned enough that I could actually read whatever sentiment someone had bothered to write instead of skimming it over a stranger's shoulder. The card was blank on the outside. That was the first thing that didn't sit right. I turned the stems in my hands, and my thumb caught on something stiff beneath the 3rd layer of paper, wedged flat where the ribbon crossed. Not a card. An envelope, sealed, no return address, my name typed instead of written, D. Ortiz, CPA, in a font no florist on earth would choose. I should have handed it straight to hotel security and walked back to my own party. 12 years in forensic accounting had taught me precisely what an unmarked, deliberately concealed document usually meant, and none of the meanings were good. I opened it anyway. That was the old reflex talking, the one that made me open every envelope with our family's name anywhere near it before anyone else could. Read it first. Understand the damage before Dad or Marcus had to explain it away. Manage it quietly. Protect the name on the door. Inside was a single printed sheet, no letterhead, cheap toner. A trust subaccount number. A routing string. Beneath it, a column of transaction dates running back 4 months, each one flagged in red by a compliance system I recognized because I'd helped design it 2 years ago. My stomach didn't drop. It went very still, the same stillness that came right before I found the one number that made an entire audit fall apart. I knew that account architecture. I'd built the shell of it myself, back when I was still trying to prove I deserved the office with my name on the door. And the electronic signature authorizing every transfer, printed small at the bottom in the compliance system's plain sans serif font, read exactly like mine. Behind me the quartet slid into something bright and celebratory, and somewhere in that ballroom people were still lifting glasses in my honor. I folded the sheet along a crease that hadn't existed 30 seconds earlier, and I did not go back to the party. The invitation arrived through my mother the way everything important did in our family, dressed up as nothing at all. Sunday dinner, 6 o'clock, we're something nice, Marcus is coming too. 3 weeks of quiet digging behind me, spreadsheets at midnight, a growing folder I kept on a drive that had never touched the firm's network, and I still hadn't said a word to anyone in this family about what I'd found. I wasn't ready to hand them the whole truth. I wanted to watch their faces first. My parents' house sat on a quiet street in Westlake, the kind of house Elena had spent 20 years perfecting for exactly this purpose, entertaining people who mattered. Tonight it was just us, but she'd set the table like the mayor was coming. Cloth napkins folded into points. The good china. A center house arrangement of white peonies that probably cost more than my dry cleaning bill for the month. Dana. She kissed my cheek without quite touching it, the way she'd done since I was 12. You look tired, long month, partnership will do that. She said it like a compliment and a diagnosis at once, then turned to fuss with the wine glasses, and I understood the conversation was already over as far as she was concerned. Raymond came in from his study with a tumbler of scotch already sweating in his hand, and he hugged me the way he always did, one arm, brief, more handshake than embrace. 61 years old and still built like the litigator he used to be before he moved the practice into estate work and quiet money. "Proud of you, kiddo," he said, the same 3 words he'd used at every milestone since I was 6. And for the first time in my life they didn't land the way they used to. Marcus arrived 20 minutes late, which was normal, and looking like he hadn't slept in several of those 20 minutes worth of days, which was not. He'd lost weight. His suit hung different across the shoulders. He hugged me too hard and too long, and when he pulled back his eyes were red-rimmed in a way no amount of eye drops fixes. "Hey, Danes." His voice caught on the old nickname. "Big week for you, huh? Big month, actually." I watched him. "You look like hell, Marcus, court's been brutal." He reached for the wine before he'd even sat down. Dinner moved the way our family dinners always moved, Elena steering conversation like a woman avoiding rocks in a channel she'd sailed 1,000 times. Raymond holding court about a case he'd just settled, Marcus saying less and less as the meal went on. I let it play out through the salad and most of the entree, watching him instead of eating, until dessert plates came out and Elena excused herself to the kitchen for coffee. "You've been quiet," I said to Marcus, once it was just the 3 of us, "been a lot going on." He wouldn't look up from his plate. "You missed my gala, I told you, filing deadline, Marcus." I kept my voice level, the same tone I used walking into a room to deliver bad audit news. I found the account. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Across the table, Raymond's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened fractionally around his glass. "What account?" Raymond said, too smoothly. "The trust sub-account with my signature on it. The one I never opened." I kept my eyes on Marcus. "Talk to me." He set the fork down. His hands were shaking, just slightly, the kind of tremor I recognized from clients who'd finally run out of road. "I didn't know what else to do," he said, so quiet I almost missed it. "I owed people, Dana. Real people. Not credit card people. The kind who don't send statements, they send guys. How much?" "Enough that I stopped sleeping." His voice cracked. "I used your credentials because nobody questions you. You're the golden one. Nobody audits Dana Ortiz's signature." He laughed, brittle and awful. "I figured I'd pay it back before anyone looked twice." You didn't think I'd be the one who looks." I panicked, okay? I panicked and I did something stupid, and I have been trying to figure out how to fix it for 2 months, and I didn't know it would." He stopped himself hard, like he'd bitten down on the rest of the sentence. "Didn't know it would what?" Marcus glanced at our father. "Just once, fast, the kind of look you give someone when you're checking whether you've already said too much." "Nothing," he said. "Forget it." But Raymond's jaw had gone tight, a muscle working at the corner of it, and his scotch sat forgotten on the table in front of him. I'd seen that look on opposing counsel right before a deposition went somewhere they didn't want it to go. "Marcus," I said slowly, "what did you think it would do?" I said forget it. His voice was too sharp now, the panic climbing. Elena chose that exact moment to come back in with the coffee tray, and she must have felt the temperature of the room, because her smile locked into place a half-second too fast. A hostess's smile stretched tight over something underneath. "Everything all right in here?" "Fine," Raymond said, before either of us could answer. He looked at me, and for just a moment the composed, unbothered version of my father slipped, and underneath it was something closer to fear. "Dana. This is a family matter. Whatever you think you found, whatever paperwork got confused, we can handle this quietly. Within the family, it's not confused paperwork, Dad. It's forgery. Federal forgery. If anyone official ever looks at it, no one official is going to look at it." His voice dropped, calm again, the courtroom calm, the kind he used when he wanted you to believe the matter was already settled. "I have 30 years of relationships in this city. Judges. Bar counsel. People who owe me favors going back further than you've been alive. This does not have to become anything. He reached over and set his hand flat on the table, not quite touching mine. Let me make this go away. The line hung in the air between us, let me make this go away, and something in me went very quiet and very cold. No, I said. I'm not doing that. Raymond's hand stayed flat on the table another second, like he expected the words to rearrange themselves if he waited long enough. Then he withdrew it, picked his scotch back up, and the mask slid back over his face so smoothly I almost doubted what I'd seen underneath it. Elena set the coffee tray down without a word and started pouring like nothing at all had happened at her table. Marcus wouldn't look at either of us. I left 20 minutes later without dessert. For 11 days after that dinner, nothing moved. I kept building my file at night, cross-referencing the sub-account against every trust ledger Marcus had ever touched, careful never to pull a document twice from the same terminal. I told no one at the firm. I told myself I had time. I was wrong. The email came on a Tuesday morning, forwarded from the firm's compliance address, subject line stripped of any warmth, notice of administrative review, D. Ortiz. Grace Whitfield, who chaired our ethics committee and had never once in 9 years called me by my first name, asked me to come to her office before I'd even set my bag down. She didn't offer coffee. She slid a printed transaction log across her desk, the same account I already knew by heart, and tapped a manicured finger against the signature line. This authorization traces back to your credentials, she said. Your login. Your device fingerprint, on the night in question. That's not possible. I was in Houston that weekend for the Callaway deposition. I'm aware of what the calendar says, Dana. I'm telling you what the system says. Her voice wasn't unkind. It was worse than unkind, it was procedural, the tone of someone already halfway through a script she didn't enjoy reading. You're being placed on administrative leave, effective today, pending a full compliance review. Your badge access has been suspended. Someone will box your active files by end of day. I sat very still, the way I did when a number in a ledger didn't reconcile and I needed my hands to stay steady long enough to find out why. Someone used my login remotely. I can prove that if you give me 48 hours, you'll have your chance to present anything relevant to the review committee. She closed the folder. I'm sorry. I believed that part, at least, by the time I got back to my floor. The nameplate on my office door already had a strip of blank label tape pressed over my name, and a moving box sat waiting on my chair like a small, patient accusation. 12 years, and it took them 4 hours to make the office look like I'd never been in it. Marcus found me in the parking garage that evening. He looked worse than he had at dinner, if that was possible, hollow around the eyes, his tie already loosened like he'd been pulling at it all day. They're saying it's you, he said, like he was delivering news instead of confessing to it. I know what they're saying. I didn't tell them anything, he said, too fast, the words tripping over each other. I swear, Dana, I didn't say your name to anyone. When Whitfield's team started asking who had access to that sub-account, I panicked. I said I didn't know anything about any shell entity. I said maybe they should ask you, since you're the one who built our whole trust architecture. He caught the look on my face and flinched. I didn't mean it like that, you just meant it exactly like that. He didn't have an answer for that. He got in his car and left, and I stood alone under the fluorescent hum of the garage feeling something in my chest go from cold to something closer to fury, clean. Useful fury, the kind that doesn't waste itself on shouting. Theo was waiting up when I got home. 2 mugs of tea already made, one of them going cold because he hadn't known what time I'd walk in. He didn't ask me to explain. He just listened while I laid it out, the leave, the box, Marcus in the garage, and when I was done he said only, okay. What do you need first? A lawyer who doesn't answer to my father's firm. Done by morning. Priya called 2 nights later, from a number that wasn't her cell. I shouldn't be doing this, she said quietly. Whitfield told the senior partners not to discuss the review with anyone under investigation. I'm risking my seat on the committee just dialing this number. A pause. I've seen the account architecture you built, Dana. I helped you build half of it. Whatever they're accusing you of, the signing pattern doesn't match anything you've ever done in 9 years of working beside you. I'll say that to the committee's face if it comes to it. I thanked her, and meant it more than she probably knew. That same week, I placed a call I'd been putting off. Wade Kessler picked up on the third ring, FBI financial crimes, a name Theo's cousin had passed along months before any of this started, back when it was just a favor between acquaintances. I didn't tell him everything. I told him enough: a forged authorization, a shell entity, a firm unwilling to look past the nearest scapegoat. "Send me what you've got," he said. Quietly. And Ms. Ortiz, if this goes where it sounds like it's going, quietly stops being an option eventually. I understood that. I just wasn't ready for how soon eventually would arrive. It arrived 3 nights later, in a firm archive room I still had badge access to for exactly 6 more hours before IT caught the oversight. I was there hunting for the sub-account's original setup documentation. Anything that might show the DocuSign trail had never actually touched my device. Instead, buried in a banker's box labeled with a decade-old client name that meant nothing to me, I found a single handwritten reconciliation memo, yellowed at the edges. Initialed in the same looping hand I'd watched sign birthday cards my whole childhood, Raymond's handwriting. A trust account. A structure I recognized instantly, because it was the same architecture Marcus had used, down to the layered sub-entity shells, except this one was dated 11 years before Marcus had ever passed the bar. My father hadn't just failed to stop what Marcus did, he'd written the blueprint first. The memo sat in my lap the whole drive home, tucked inside a plain folder so it wouldn't wrinkle, like it might somehow lose its weight if I handled it wrong. 11 years old and it still felt radioactive. I didn't call Marcus. I didn't call my father. I called Wade Kessler. And then I called the lawyer Theo had found for me, and I told them both the same thing. I had something bigger than the sub-account, and I wanted it handled the right way, all at once, so no one got the chance to spin it first. "You understand what you're asking for," Kessler said, on a line I was fairly sure wasn't secure enough for what I was about to say next. "You're asking to hand over a case against your own father. I'm asking to stop being the only person in this family who tells the truth about what's actually going on in it." He was quiet for a second. "Send me everything you've got. I'll loop in the ethics board myself, so it happens on 1 clock instead of 2. It took 9 days to set up. 9 days of not sleeping, of Theo bringing me coffee at 4 in the morning without asking if I wanted it, of Priya calling twice more from unlisted numbers just to make sure I hadn't lost my nerve. I hadn't. I'd lost the version of myself that used to. The meeting happened in a windowless federal conference room that looked like it had been furnished from a government surplus catalog: gray carpet, a scarred table, a water pitcher nobody touched. No mahogany. No skyline view. Just Kessler, a junior agent taking notes, Grace Whitfield representing the ethics board, and me, laying out 3 years of forged transactions and one 11-year-old memo like I was presenting a closing argument I'd rehearsed 100 times in my head and never once out loud. Raymond arrived 20 minutes late, in a suit that fit like armor, with an outside attorney I didn't recognize trailing a half step behind him. He didn't look at me when he sat down. He looked at Kessler, the way he'd look at any adversary he thought he could still out-negotiate. "I understand there's some confusion about historical account structures," Raymond said, before anyone had asked him a single question. His voice had the same courtroom calm from the dinner table, except now it sounded thinner, like a recording of itself. "I'd be happy to clarify the firm's practices going back decades, if that's useful. Context matters here. Context isn't what's on the table, Mr. Ortiz," Kessler said. "Documentation is." He slid a copy of the memo across the table, still in its sleeve. Raymond's eyes moved over his own handwriting. For just a second, less than a second, something in his face gave way completely, the mask dropping so fast I almost missed it, and underneath it wasn't anger. It was an old man realizing the floor he'd built his whole life on had never actually been solid. Then it was gone, and he was reaching for his attorney's arm instead of an answer. "This predates any current allegation by over a decade," his attorney cut in smoothly. "Whatever my client did or didn't do in his 30s has no bearing on it has bearing on why his son thought this was survivable. I said. My voice didn't shake. I'd promised myself it wouldn't, and it didn't. Marcus didn't invent a new kind of fraud. He copied one. He learned it at our dinner table. Marcus hadn't said a word since he'd walked in. He sat 2 seats down from our father, his hands flat on the table, staring at nothing. When Kessler turned to him and asked, simply, whether he had anything he wanted to add to the record, I watched him take a breath that seemed to cost him something. Yes, Marcus said. His voice cracked once and then steadied. I'll cooperate. Fully. I'm not doing this to protect him anymore. He didn't look at Raymond when he said it. I did what I did because I was scared and stupid, and I thought there was a version of this where nobody found out. There isn't. I want that on record too. Raymond's attorney started to object. Raymond put a hand on his arm to stop him, and for the first time all morning, he looked directly at me. You didn't have to do it this way, he said quietly. Not an accusation. Almost unbelievably, something like respect, forced out through gritted teeth. Yes, I did, I said. It's the only way that was ever going to be honest. Whitfield closed her folder with a soft, final click. The ethics board will be opening a formal review of both accounts, effective today, she said. Given what's on the table, I'll be recommending this proceed in full coordination with the Bureau's investigation rather than as a separate internal matter. Kessler didn't smile, men like him rarely did, but he gave me the smallest nod, the kind that meant this is moving now, and it isn't stopping. Raymond Ortiz sat very still at the far end of the table, a man who had spent 30 years making problems disappear with a phone call, discovering in real time that this particular problem had a paper trail with his own name on it, going back further than anyone at that table had been prepared to believe. The weeks after that conference room moved differently than the weeks before it. Slower in some places, faster in others. The way time does when the worst part is already behind you and all that's left is watching the consequences land one by one. Raymond's disbarment hearing happened on a Thursday in October. I didn't go. Theo asked if I wanted to, and I told him no, because I already knew how it would end, and I didn't need to watch my father's name get read into a record like a case file. The state bar's findings came back within 6 weeks of Kessler's investigation opening: misappropriation of client trust funds, over a decade of it, structured through shell entities that traced back, ledger by ledger, to the same handwriting I'd found in that banker's box. He surrendered his license rather than fight the recommendation. 2 months later, the federal charges followed: wire fraud, conspiracy, the kind of indictment that doesn't leave much room for a plea to something smaller. Elena resigned from the city council the same week the story broke in the local paper. She didn't call me. She sent one text, 4 days after her resignation was announced: I hope you're satisfied. I didn't answer it. Some conversations aren't worth having, and I'd finally learned the difference between silence that costs you something and silence that costs you nothing at all. Marcus took the deal Kessler offered him. Full cooperation, a guilty plea to a single reduced charge, restitution he'd be paying off for years. No prison time, on account of the cooperation, a fact that would have felt like an injustice to me 6 months earlier, and now just felt like the ordinary shape of how these things get resolved. He called me the night before his sentencing hearing. I don't expect you to come, he said. His voice sounded older than 29. I wasn't planning to, I know. A pause. I keep thinking about how easy it would have been if I'd just told you the truth the first week. Before any of it turned into this, you would have had to admit you needed help instead of a cover story, I said. That's harder for some people than a federal indictment, apparently. He laughed, short and humorless. That's fair. I'm not going to pretend we're fine, Marcus. We're not fine. But I don't hate you either. I just don't trust you, and I probably won't for a long time. Maybe not ever. I meant it as fact. Not cruelty. You'll have to be okay with that. I know, he said again, and this time it sounded like he actually did. The firm's ethics board voted to lift my administrative leave 2 weeks after Raymond's federal charges were filed. Grace Whitfield called me herself this time, no forwarded email, and told me the partnership was mine, the review fully closed, my name cleared on every point. She said it like she expected relief. I felt something closer to exhaustion. There's also the matter of succession, she added, carefully. With your father stepping back and Marcus no longer able to practice, the partners would like to discuss you taking a larger leadership role. Given everything you've built here. I sat with that offer for 3 days before I gave her an answer. It was, on paper, everything I'd spent 12 years working toward, the name on the letterhead, the corner office, the title I'd have inherited exactly the way I always assumed I would, through inheritance rather than choice. Theo didn't push me either way. Priya told me she'd support whatever I decided, and meant it. In the end, it wasn't a hard decision so much as a clear one. I didn't want to run a firm built on my father's blueprint, even with his name finally off the door. I wanted something that was only ever mine. I gave my notice in November. Whitfield didn't argue. I think, by then, she understood. I found a small office 2 floors above a bakery on East 6th Street. The kind of space that still smelled faintly of fresh paint when I signed the lease. Theo helped me carry in the first desk. Priya sent a card, and a referral for my very first independent client. The following week, on my last night at the old firm, I sat alone in my former office with a box of outdated letterheads someone had left behind in a supply closet. Heavy cream stock, the old firm name embossed at the top in gold. I fed each sheet through the shredder one at a time, watching the paper curl and vanish into thin gray ribbons, and there was no anger in it this time. No fire, no ritual, nothing that needed to burn. Just an ending, handled plainly, the way I handle everything now. 3 weeks later, a sign installer came to the new office with a single brushed metal nameplate. I watched him level it against the frosted glass door, drill 2 clean holes, and set the screws. Dana Ortiz. Forensic accounting, no second name beside it. No firm behind it but the one I was building myself, one client, one file, one honest ledger at a time.